just that fact when you speak about the inequality, just think about when we were required to go to virtual learning, and then we realized that not everybody has a device. Mm-hmm. Then we realized that, man, not everybody has internet. So the unfairness of education, I mean, it's always been there, but it's sort of like that elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. We all know the families that struggle. We know about it from day one, that this is the family. We know that, there are a whole lot of things that's going on, and we did nothing to assist them.
It's the Empowerment Perspective Podcast, hosted by Demiso Josie and Mr. Kareem Spence.
All right, welcome to yet another episode of the Empowerment Perspective Podcast. I go by the name of Dr. Demiso A. Josie alongside
Spencer's here.
And
Amy.
All right, have y'all ended y'all little Madden feud yet, or is that still going on from our previous podcast?
It's still going on. I'm going after Mr. Miyagi now. Wax on, wax off. He don't want this smoke. Go ahead and get your coach. Get your coach's coach. Get everybody.
How do you feel about that, Jamie?
You know what? I did good. I'm getting better every time I play. I feel like I've become part of the game a little bit, so I'm ready. And I talked to my second coach today, so I'm really, really ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you tell your sensei he don't want this smoke either.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we're talking about Madden in the last couple of podcasts because we're going to put together a Madden tournament and a Y2K tournament so that we can celebrate life and raise some money for some needy families and organizations in the New Jersey area. So every podcast we kind of we're practicing because we're old people. We're not young people who have all this time to, devote to playing PlayStation. But while we're quarantining, we got to get our skills up the par so that we can make this competition interesting, so to say the least. So apparently, Kareem has 16 years experience and Jamie just picked up the sticks.
2 days.
2 days. On the previous podcast, the last podcast that we had Ariana on down in New Orleans. What you guys feel about that particular podcast?
I think that the work that she's doing and showing others that your career doesn't have to stop in the classroom. So when you start to feel a little uncomfortable and when you feel like it's time to move on, that doesn't mean that you actually have to switch grade levels. Sometimes it's necessary to go out and do it yourself and show others that there is a better way to be able to reach out and touch families and as well as educate them.
Absolutely. Jamie, how did you feel about that podcast?
It really made me think about where I'm at in my career. I've gotten to the point where I don't care what others think if I know I'm doing what I need to in the classroom, but it's making me start to think, should I do something else?
Got you. So that was definitely an empowering podcast that we had. So shout out to Ariana. Don't forget her books that are out there. That information was up on the previous podcast. She has 2 books out there, and she's doing some wonderful things, a podcast of her own, and she's putting in that work down there in New Orleans. This is actually their second wave of, catastrophic event. As you remember, a couple of years ago, they were dealing with Hurricane Katrina and the educational system and the aftermath of that. So now we're dealing with this quarantine. So, shout out to them. Hopefully they're safe and just like everyone else. But we always preach at this particular time to make sure that you are using this time wisely, preparing for the back end of this thing. We'll get through this, but you need to be ready. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for you out there once we get through this. Part of what we do here at the Empowerment Perspective Group is that we highlight people that are doing great things. In the previous podcast, we talked about leadership. We talked about who's going to be the next leader of our generation. So one of the areas that we wanted to look into is the area of politics. Politics is something that we haven't really talked about and discussed on the Empowerment Perspective Group that much. But obviously our political leaders are at the forefront right now of what's going on across the country. And in some cases in the world, even locally. Let's not forget, your local governors, your local congressmen, senators, all that stuff. There's some powerful people that are doing the work right now. So we decided to reach out and do our network. Shout out to Gary Monteroso who hooked us up with this particular contact. But this gentleman that I'm going to introduce was really interesting to me because he is from South Jersey. Violin is not too far from us. I'm very familiar with Violin in the area, but he's putting in a lot of work. looked a little bit into his story. Education is important to him, so kind of want to give him an opportunity to talk about that in that space, and also some of the things that he's working on for not only South Jersey, but also across the United States as well. So Will Cunnigham, welcome to the show, sir. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for agreeing to be on. Sorry for all the craziness in the beginning, but we're rocking and rolling right now. And
you're normal now.
Yeah. So I just want to dive right into it because I know a little bit about your story, Violin, New Jersey. I believe one of the clips that I saw, you spoke about just being you and your mother and how education was important to you. Let's just start a little bit about your background in terms of where you've come from, how you kind of grew up, and why education is important to you.
Yeah, happy to do that. You know, for me, telling my personal story on a campaign trail is integral. It's important that people understand when I say I'm going to represent them, it's because I have the shared experience of hardship here in South Jersey. That's because I was born to a teenage mom whose family was on food stamps. You know, I was brought from the hospital to Section 8 housing. So I know that life, to be quite frank. And for part of my high school career, for a substantial, almost half of it, we were homeless. You know, my mom has always been an hourly wage worker. She's still an hourly wage worker. She's actually an essential worker these days. She's been going to work every day of this pandemic. And I have some thoughts about that. But for me, you know, homework was always a prerequisite to playtime. You know, that was always just impressed upon me in the household. You gotta, you know, no one ever forced me to get straight A's, but they did force me to do my homework at the very least. And I think it was, you know, despite all the hardship, a lot of folks in my family and in my, you know, church and school, guidance counselors sort of recognized something within me, the ability to do well in school and sort of fight despite the obstacles. But it wasn't, obviously it's not easy, right? And it shouldn't take someone having to overcome all that to change their lives. And that's why I'm really in politics, because I know folks need a fighter who really deeply, intimately understands the struggle. You know, my high school counselor, you know, I'm not sure, I know you guys are, you know, you're familiar with Vineland. Do you know the Travel Inn? It used to be, it's gone now, but it used to be a hotel right on the corner of East and Landis, right in Vineland.
Is that where the bowling alley was, Will?
No, it's where the Landis Theater is. It's diagonally across where the Landis Theater was.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was just like a known low-income hotel for criminal activity, things of that nature. That's where we lived for almost 2 years when I was in high school. And the only reason it even became public, my guidance counselor called me down in her office one day. This might have been 11th grade. Because for months, like for several months, mail was coming back to Vineland High School marked undeliverable because you can't really send mail to a hotel room. And so she called me down and asked me about that. And she was the only adult in that high school who knew, like my closest friends, like maybe one or two really close friends in high school knew my situation. But I was really honest with her, and she didn't report it because it wasn't an issue. I had a 4.0. So as long as I kept that up, she kind of just kept my secret to herself. It didn't really come out until, you know, I think the Daily Journal, the local paper here in Cumberland County, reached out to the high school guidance counselors, any, you know, inspirational stories, anything we should highlight about this graduating class of 2003. And they told, you know, she told them I had been recently accepted into an Ivy League school, Brown University. You know, there was a program called Gear Up. I think a lot of Gear Up still exists throughout the country and in New Jersey. They had taken their lowest income but highest achieving students on a college tour from, you know, we visited schools in New Jersey. We went all the way up to New England, and we had an overnight visit to Brown, and I just fell in love with the campus, and I worked as hard as I could to get in. And in some really odd way, living in that hotel is what drove me to accelerate to be as involved in extracurricular activities, right? Because to get into an Ivy League school, you know, you can have the perfect grades. You got to be bringing something more, to be quite frank. And I did not like living in that hotel. I didn't want anyone to know I was living in that hotel. I was an insecure 15-year-old. Like, that you don't want your friends to know that kind of stuff about you. And so I joined quite literally any kind of club I could join to stay after school as long as possible. So I was on the football team. And then when football season ended, I was doing mock trial and debate team. I was in select choir. I got a part-time job at McDonald's. Like, I was keeping myself as busy as possible to never be in that hotel room or in those premises. And all the while keeping my grades up. And then senior year rolled around and I had an Ivy League application.
That is awesome. Now, Kareem, you do some things with middle schoolers in terms of exposing them to colleges and things of that nature. And I think Will's story kind of attests to the power of exposure, especially as early as we can. Talk a little bit about what you do with the middle school kids. And I've obviously seen it myself, but and why you decided to do those things on your level.
Yeah. So what I was always so grateful for that experience I had, getting that exposure to a school like Brown and getting that opportunity to be on that campus for 4 years. It was transformative. It literally changed my life. And so I decided my first job out of college, I wanted it to be as impactful as possible to serve populations of kids that I had a lot in common with, kids of color, low income, who are going to have additional obstacles in their life to really change their life outcomes. And so I applied to a program called Teach for America. It's a national nonprofit organization, and they recruit college graduates who didn't necessarily plan to be teachers, and their whole mission is to close the achievement gap in the hardest hit schools and communities, and that achievement gap exists unfortunately along racial and economic lines. And so you have to commit 2 years. I mean, several people, a lot of my friends stayed in education. They become lifelong teachers, principals, administrators. But it was important that at least for those 2 years out of college, because I always knew I wanted to go to law school, but I wanted to do something substantive before doing that. And I taught middle school social studies for 2 years.
Yeah. So
I know
that from the environment that I grew up in. And when Will talks about self-esteem, typically when you don't have options, what you normally will gravitate to is what you like. So you have guards, you have money, and you have clothes because you want to build up your self-esteem. So a lot of decisions are made early in high school to go illegal routes to be able to obtain what they need, because this is all the information that people are giving them. So Will was fortunate enough to be able to have someone to expose him. Now, I would like to have seen them expose him a lot earlier in middle school, because that may have driven him even harder to the point where as though he didn't have to use Gear Up. He probably could have had scholarship money. Like with Will's story in itself, it's probably, I want to say at least 5,000 or 6,000 scholarships that he could apply for, and they would just gave it to him right off the bat. Like the ability to overcome homelessness and still have 4.0 versus those that didn't have any type of issues in their life. You're talking about kids that have pretty much perfect lives at home, aren't able to do what Will is able to do. So when you have that in a student and you see it early, you know that there's an internal drive that's unlike no other. And you want to be able to give them resources that they can look at and go home and say, you know what, I don't like this particular environment that I'm in, and I need to find a way out. So what I do with all my middle school kids is I expose them to as much as possible. I give everyone an opportunity. Why? Because it wasn't given to me. So when Will talks about going to law school, I give my middle school students an LSAT test. I get there, take a look at it. If you want to go to medical school, no problem. Here's the MCATs, because you need to know exactly why this information that we're teaching every day is important.
Yeah, no, that is crucial. But also just a matter of knowing that here locally, somebody overcome, right? Somebody that could. This isn't a story that I think we've always heard these stories, but not necessarily in our own local community here in South Jersey, which is why it was so important for me to tell my story, because I know people need to hear it. I know kids are still struggling, and I know you guys talked earlier about New Orleans. When I was teaching, I'm 34, so take that as you will. People say I look younger than that, but I taught in Houston, Texas. In 2007, I had Hurricane Katrina evacuees in my classroom. I had kids from New Orleans who were replaced in Houston. And so, we're talking about real trauma with young kids in these classrooms and across the country. So it's real.
That's definitely interesting, and I think a lot of educators who listen to this, and I think they know it, but a lot of these kids, we're their last hope, right? Their last chance at it. You know what I mean? So it is our responsibility to make sure that we are exposing them to as much as we possibly can, and hopefully that it will spark something in them. These children are intelligent individuals. They persevere through a lot. That lesson of perseverance in itself could be so powerful if they could get out of that mind frame, of their environment. And our job as educators is really to expose these kids to as much as we possibly can, and be compassionate and understand that they bringing that baggage into the classroom. Yes, they might be angry, they might be hungry, they might be tired, and we got to stop, and think for a second that, because not all of them are going to let you know what's going on. My story is the Wills. Like, no one knew that I was getting abused at home, all that stuff, but it was normal to me. So, but I still brought those behaviors with me into the classroom. And you need to have compassion, and you need to be there to open up.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, and I think a lot of it's been, Teach for America has they specialize in that kind of training for, they're not just taking these Ivy Leaguers and putting them in the classroom saying you work magic. They specialize in that kind of training, that compassion, understanding communities, building relationships. Because even for me, like even I understood these kids better than most because I went through the same struggle. And I kind of went in thinking I was going to be like an authoritarian in my classroom. I was going to like whip everybody in shape. We're going to overcome the odds. We're going to beast these tests, and you guys are going to, change your life outcomes. You got to build relationships first, more than anything else. And if they don't trust you, if they don't know that you understand what they're going through, the wall's up and you can't get through.
Absolutely. Jamie, I see you shaking your head up there. I know we talked about this on previous podcasts. Do you bring your personal experiences into the classroom a lot so that you can have those relationships?
Yes, I think that students need to hear that we as teachers have a past too, and our past isn't always picture perfect. So if you can find a place to relate, you have to listen to your students first. And if you can find somewhere to relate to them somehow, listen to what they're saying. Once you have them on board, you could teach them anything, but you have to get them on board first.
I think Ariana on her previous podcast, when she said the teacher wrote the phone number up on the board, gave out a personal thing. I think that's obviously the beginning part of making that connection. And I think a lot of teachers are afraid to do that because they always think the negative of it. Crank them my phone and all that stuff.
Yeah, now I wouldn't necessarily advise anybody to put their personal phone number up on there because, again, as a fourth grader, me knowing how I terrorize the classroom, listen, I'm going to write your phone number on the bathroom wall. I'm going to write, if you need help, call this number. I'm going to be, and back that time, we used to go to the mall, so I'm going to write it on the wall. On the tables, if you need help, you need to call such and such, especially if you threw a steak lab. Absolutely. I'm going to make sure we put you on blast.
You too funny. So, I want to get into why politics. You had an avenue to go the teaching route, but you decided, maybe it was before then, but why politics? Why did you decide to go into politics?
Yeah, I think I just always wanted to be an advocate for people. And for me, it was about giving back. And this was the avenue that I thought I could best give back and really be a fighter. And I think, and it's been so obvious, especially in politics, that we don't have regular people in these roles. These are really important, decisions being made that drive our country, that impact everyone's lives, and we don't have working class people at the table. Like, I'm an Ivy Leaguer from a working class family. Like, my mom and my brother are essential service workers. They're still working every day during this pandemic. I don't know how many Congress people can say that, and that's the problem. Because we have people drafting this legislation, people who are making decisions about how much a family needs in a stimulus check, and they are millionaires and they don't understand. And that's why we got $1,200 and not what we actually needed, which was far more than that.
I agree, Will, because listen, I've already had conversations like that. $1,200 that you send me, that won't even get me through a week. I can tell you that now, because when we was all there, I'm paying bills, so that won't even get me through a week.
No, you have a man who's the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, said something outlandish this week, saying that he thinks that's enough for people to get by for 10 weeks. I don't know what world he's living in. He is clearly a multimillionaire who's never struggled anything in his life, but that's the problem. We need people who can forcefully push back against that, who understand that that's not realistic.
10 weeks, $1,200.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm supposed to live on $120 a week. That won't even get me through tomorrow. I can tell you that right now.
Absolutely not.
And a person like me, I don't even get it. I just missed the cutoff. So I don't even get $1,200.
Yeah, right. But look at how they came up with that $1,200 figure, right? So if you break it down, the average national minimum wage, the federal lowest it can be is $7.25. $7.25 times 40 hours a week, times that by 4 weeks in a month. That's $1,160. They basically just gave everyone a minimum wage monthly check. And we put ourselves in this position because we have not had federal legislation that has boosted a guaranteed minimum wage of what we know is a livable. Well, $15 isn't even livable, but that's what we've been pushing for, and we don't have it. And so the Democrats started out in that negotiation in a weak spot because the minimum wage was already so low.
Got it. That's crazy.
But I know, I guess, again, from the community I grew up in, I know that lack of economic opportunities will lead you to engage in other activities. And, and I guess this is why we have
survival mode. Yeah.
It's not feasible for me to believe that anybody can live off of $120 a week. In this day and time, it's maybe back in 1955, maybe, but in 2020, $155 is now you can barely buy a good pair of speakers for $150 now.
Yeah, I mean, and we should have anticipated. We're seeing folks even people who are eligible for these programs aren't getting them in a timely manner, right? Like, we got Trump who people are going to get their paper checks later because he wanted his signature on it. Like,
do you think this is a byproduct though of capitalism? I mean, in order for capitalism to actually function correctly, you have to have a winner and a loser. I mean, it's based upon competition, right? Somebody has to lose on some level. Is this a byproduct of the very system that we're living in?
I mean, I think it's definitely capitalism driving his urge to reopen the country. New York's just started to flatten the curve. That does not mean it's improved. It just means it's not as bad. It's not continuing to get any worse. It's just stuck at really, really bad. And New Jersey is about to reach that spot. But other states have not reached their peaks. Here in South Jersey, Cumberland County and Salem County, we're the last counties. We are amongst the lowest 3 in terms of cases that we have, but we're doubling every 3 to 4 days because it just took a little bit longer to get here. So we're not. South Jersey is not out of the clear.
So, Will, let me ask you this. I'm going to cut you off. Let me ask you this: is it because we have certain cultures that won't even get tested? Like, we have cultural barriers to say, I'm not going to the doctor. And for certain people, it goes all the way back to the Tuskegee experiment where they say, you know what, I'm not even messing around with the doctor.
Yeah, and that's real in our community. That's a real history of really something really terrible happening to our people that was allowed by the government. So I mean, I get the hesitancy, but I'm still encouraging people. If you were showing, just adhere to the guidelines, wash your hands, get hand sanitizer if you can. Don't go out unless it's absolutely necessary. I know right now, and I'll tell this, Acme, through Instacart, if you join Instacart for the first time, you will get a free grocery delivery from Acme. Just that your first order will be free. So just be on the lookout and try to figure out how you can sort of really minimize your exposure. And I know, those folks who are delivering that food obviously are going to be exposed, but they're being compensated for that. And I actually ordered a couple weeks ago, and I understood that I was in my decision not to go into the grocery store. Somebody else was going to be doing it as their job, and I gave a tip accordingly because I understood and respected that work. So
there's a lot of businesses out there too that are creating hand sanitizers. Shout out to Guy Zampa and Little Water Distillery, the local breweries. They're shut down. They're also a distillery. Also creating hand sanitizers. So Little Water Distillery is actually giving out free hand sanitizers right now. The little travel size. But there are pockets of things that a lot of people don't know about. I didn't even know about the Instacart thing, but there's a lot of things and a lot of research that's available to people right now. We just got to go out and unfortunately, do the work to find those pockets of things.
Yeah, and I've been trying to amplify that. Whenever I hear about those, whether it's the food pantries that I've been volunteering at, giving folks produce, the soup kitchens where we've been giving out hot meals. Whenever I'm going to be there, whenever I know they're doing that, I've been blasting on social media. Lazy Eye Distillery in Landisville, right on Harding Highway. They've twice in the past month they've already given away hand sanitizer for free. They're a travel size, but it's in short supply and you're getting it for free. And we're gonna keep the campaign page is Will Cunnigham for New Jersey. If you type that into Facebook, you'll find it, and you'll be able to get our notifications about those kind of services when they come up.
Absolutely.
So Will, let me ask this. So again, I traditionally follow a lot of politics, and I'm a voter. As a voter, because I want to focus on you, why should I vote for Will?
Yeah, I think experience matters, and I have the dual set of experiences that matter. I'm the only candidate in this race who, when I talk to a person who has gotten food stamps or is on food stamps, when I talk to someone who's had their electricity, gas, or phone or cable shut off at some point, when I talk to voters who have been homeless at some point, or someone that was born to a teenage mom, and I tell them I understand, it's not a talking point. It's real.
Okay.
So that experience matters, but also the dual experience of having been on Capitol Hill for 6 years. For the past 6 years, I've been in the trenches, fighting for New Jerseyans, fighting for people across this country. I've taken on corporations, pharmaceutical companies. I've gotten CEOs fired. That's the work I've been doing until I joined this race. That's what I was doing on Capitol Hill. I was a chief investigator on the House Oversight Committee, working for Elijah Cummings until he passed away this past fall. And we need people who have both of those experiences, because having that experience in DC knows I'm prepared to do the job on day one, and I'm prepared to do it to fight on behalf of people who need a fighter, because I know their struggle.
Question for you, Will. Now I have a say 12-year-old that's interested into going into politics. What kind of advice could you give this 12-year-old who might one day follow in your footsteps? Like, what are some of the, I guess, the pitfalls, some of the struggles, and also some of the good stuff that come along with being a politician?
I mean, at that age, it's all good stuff, right? It's just like you can get involved in community service projects. The Red Cross is always, there are local offices everywhere. Get trained on, Heimlich maneuver. Those having that kind of skill set, right? And and as a teenager, as a kid, you can be a volunteer for those kinds of things. The American Heart Society, American Cancer Society, they have annual, March for Our Lives and things of that nature. These were all things that me and my friends planned together when we were in high school. And you can, blood drives, things of that nature. And, I gave blood for the first time when I was 17. So you don't really have to wait to be an adult to really have a beneficial impact on your community. Especially, and you can do that at any age. I think, I was one of those kids who was always just running for stuff. It was like class rep and, your homeroom class and, student body president, that kind of thing. You don't have to do that at a young age, but if you are inclined, those are good programs to sort of build your skill set. Public speaking is important, right? And so, if you have opportunities to become a better public speaker, I know it's a little hard to, especially as a teenager or as an adolescent, to sort of lean into a weakness. But that's something you have to become comfortable with, because you can't improve things you ignore. And so, I did that. They had a program called Toastmasters in middle school. It was an after-school program. I think it was like a 5-week after-school program where you just worked on public speaking. I did that at the age of 12. I got involved in debate and mock trial. And to be honest, I still get nervous when I public speak. It's not, you are putting yourself out there every time you're in front of a group. You're never not going to be nervous. It's not going to teach you not to be nervous. You're getting the skill set so that despite how nervous you are, you still do a good job. That's what's important to keep in mind.
Right. I tell young people all the time about public speaking, and they get all nervous and things. That nerves is energy, and it's channeling your energy into the right places. You can let it overcome you, or you can use that as a energy to deliver whatever it is that you want to deliver.
Yeah.
I don't know not one athlete, not one public speaker who doesn't get nervous before they go on. It's just a matter how you channel those things.
Yeah, professional athletes get nervous before they go on the field or the court. Like it's just a thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jamie, I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I know you took notes. I don't know. I see you up there shaking your head. I love putting you on the spot, but I know you took some notes earlier. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask Will anything you wanted to ask him, if you have any questions.
Well, I'll ask a question on behalf of teachers. So do you have anything or do you have any platforms in regards to education that you're working towards?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for, having been a teacher, for me, it was always important to make sure they also had an adequate voice. And you'd be shocked how many people on Capitol Hill are doing education policy and have never taught in a classroom, which is important for me because, when I worked in Senator Booker's office when when the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was reauthorized in 2015. And that's, that they, for the first time, they were really going to revise No Child Left Behind. And I was doing education policy during that time. We fought to maintain accountability standards and make sure that schools had the tools they need to track their kids. We also made sure that it was now required that school districts across the country would have to track homeless and foster youth, because I personally knew that those kids don't self-identify. Poor teenagers are not going to let you know that they are homeless. This is a fact. So making it having schools sort of be motivated to keep better track of those kids. Teacher pay is still too low. It's always been too low. That's obviously something we need to address in a real manner. And I know a number of presidential candidates. I know when Kamala was a candidate and still running, she had a really good proposal out there that I can see myself supporting. For me, I've been really broad in my fight for education. Like even as an investigator, I fought about pharmaceutical companies that price gouged. I've investigated e-cigarette companies who were getting kids addicted to Juuls. I investigated Juul. When I talk about holding corporations accountable, we brought the founder of Juul in for a hearing when we discovered that they were marketing to children illegally. And so much so that I talked to some high schoolers who we brought down to testify at our hearing, that testified that a subcontractor of Juul came into their school and under the guise of a health assembly, no principals, no teachers, counselors, just this presenter and the kids, told these kids in their auditorium that vaping was safe, Juuls were safe, and demonstrated how to use it in a school. And so we brought those kids down, and we brought the founder of Juul into our hearing. And 2 weeks later, the CEO of Juul was fired. And we know that's a school issue because kids are already bringing a number of issues into the classroom that are distracting. The last thing you need is someone taking a puff of an e-cigarette while your back is turned as a teacher. And we know that was happening. But I've also investigated, Betsy DeVos has been a cancer to teachers across the country. And I personally investigated her cabinet. She's rolled back protections of every kind. She's brought in former lobbyists of problematic industries like for-profit colleges. Not all of them are bad, and some of them have given people some good degrees that have gotten them to better jobs, but some of them collapse, and they take money from people who are desperate to change their lives and use education to do it, and then they collapse. And people of all ages and races left with tuition bills they can't pay, no job, and worthless class credits and a worthless degree. And so we did investigate Betsy DeVos and the people that are protecting these kinds of schools. And we got some students relief. And so I've been pretty across the spectrum from, we know universal pre-K is needed, and I'm in support of that. But from universal pre-K to 3-year-olds all the way up to college education, I've been fighting that fight. I'm going to keep fighting it because there are vulnerable populations at every segment of the education spectrum, and that's who the people I want to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
I think now is the perfect time for change, especially in the educational industry with everything that's going on. I think on the back end of this, I think parents have a firsthand understanding now of what educators do and the importance of teachers. I think now is probably a prime time. And I think it's one of the industries that could possibly change on the back end of this pandemic. I think now I just don't want us to lose this opportunity to be able to make some much needed changes in the educational arena. I think it's really important, that we get the system right, or at least headed in the right direction, because right now there's a lot of pockets that we're not serving the children the way that we serving across the board, especially those that are in low social economical areas and things of that nature. There's definitely not equals and unbalance that goes on. We talked about this in our last podcast. We even talked about how certain educational policies in regards to teacher observations and things of that nature needs to be taken. The whole system we need to take a time now to look at the whole entire system and see what's really working in all of our classrooms and start making those changes now. But now, again, this goes line with what we've been saying. Now is the time to prepare for that. Not, waiting till everything clears up. Now is the time for us to start preparing for that. Especially educators and parents that are out there that now see the importance of what we do every single day.
Not only that, Miso, just that fact, when you speak about the inequality, just think about when we were required to go to virtual learning, and then we realized that not everybody has a device. Then we realized that, man, not everybody has internet. So the unfairness of education, I mean, it's always been there, but it's sort of like that elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. We all know the families that struggle. We know about it from day one, that this is the family. We know that, there are a whole lot of things that's going on, and we did nothing to assist them.
And it's starting to bleed into even the middle class, right? So they take, for my district, for example, we don't have enough Chromebooks to be one-on-one. So our thing is one per family, right? So now you got to take a family that has 4 kids in it. They got one Chromebook and maybe another computer, and mom and dad's using that for work if they have to do that. You got to share on top of all this work that's on top of it. You got to do that. And then I have teachers that have kids, right? Their own kids, and then they're teaching, someone else's kids. They're like, there's so many inequalities that exist, and it's starting to bleed into the middle class. That's why I think it's really important for us to take a look at it right now, because I think the landscape of education is going to change across the board, from K all the way through the university up to the university level. I mean, they're already talking about no physical classes for colleges and universities until January, possibly at the earliest. So the landscape of education is changing, but it's going to come down to the haves and the have-nots, where it's going to be an imbalance that's going to exist.
And that's why we need, politicians who are there to advocate on our behalf to make sure that we have certain policies, mainly educational policies, because, like I've always said, that education is the greatest equalizer. It doesn't matter which background or what barrier you have to overcome. If you're able to have access to it, it can change the scope of your entire life. It can change generations of your family. Absolutely. And this is why it's really important. Like when he mentioned, I think she's the Secretary of Education that you had mentioned, and her policy. Like, we have to make sure that this upcoming election that we're paying attention, and that we're going to put the right leader in place to make sure that everyone has, equal opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we want to switch gears before we get out of here in our podcast. I'd like to have it end with a little bit fun, a little bit lightheartedness on it, because we talked about some heavy things here, and we always do an empowerment perspective. But we have 2 segments that we like to end our show with. Our 2-foot assassin up there, Jamie Roberts, he's going to ask about all things little. And then, of course, Mr. Petty has his segment as well. I'm going to go with you, Jamie, first. Back to the ladies. So all things little. Floor is yours.
Okay. I really, really dislike small vacations. I know. Listen though. I know. But hear me out. Like, if I'm going to go somewhere, I don't tell me we're going to go to this great place and do all these things, and then we're there for 2 days. That's really, if we're going to go somewhere, we need to go there and be there for an amount of time for me to be able to relax. I need a few days to get comfortable and see stuff, and then I can enjoy myself.
Well, here's the thing. We went to a city. I'm not going to say the city that we spoke at. We went to a city, and I felt like we went to the city, and I thought the 2-3 days that we were there, I thought that was enough. Like, I don't know if I could handle any more than those 2 days. What if you're in a place where it's just like, all right, I've seen everything and I've done everything. I'm good. Like, you still want to be there another 4 or 5 days?
At least, like, when I go somewhere, I want to be there for at least like 4 to 5 days. There should not be a 2-day vacation ever.
So this particular city that we visited and spoke at, you would have been okay with another 4 or 5 days there.
Well, we were there for 2, so if we were there for like another 2 or 3 days, I would have been able to do some shopping, go see some stuff, hang out, and do some social things.
I get it. I don't know.
I mean, sometimes a 3-day weekend vacation is like a little nice pick-me-up, though. Sometimes too.
True.
You just can't travel too far. I think traveling too far for something that's not that short that's not a good payoff.
See?
Well, maybe you should have came up with the vacation, Jamie, instead of relying on this person to create this vacation. Maybe
I'm not saying I did it. I'm just saying I don't like the idea of small vacations.
What do you think about that, Mr. Petty?
Well, it's his thing. A vacation is just what it is. It's a vacation to get away from what your daily life is. It doesn't mean that every morning you wake up, you have to have a to-do list. Okay, we need to go and tour this place. We need to go to the museum. That's work. For somebody like me, it's work. No,
I'm not saying you have to do something every day. Like, if you're there for extra days, then you have it. Like, when we went to Disney World, we went for 8 days because I needed rest days in between to like sit at the pool and have a few drinks, like days that weren't planned. I wasn't going to Disney if we weren't going for more than a week. I'm not going to Disney for 3 days. That's stupid.
Are you the type of person that has to have an agenda on vacation?
No, I really don't.
It sounds like you do.
No, that's why I need extra days, because if I don't have an agenda, then I can take my time.
She's going on vacation to do stuff. Me, I'm going probably as far as the door at my hotel room. That's what a vacation is for me. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay in my luxury room. That's a vacation. I'm ordering room service every day.
You ain't learned your lesson from the other city that we spoke at. You spent all that money and that.
Listen, I had a corner room with a view. It was nice down in Atlanta.
Let's see.
Oh, okay.
All right, Petty, you wrap it up for me. What you got for it?
Okay. So quick question. I'm on my mission to be able to gather as many petty people as possible. I want a petty army. So would you consider yourself as being petty?
Is this for me, this question?
Yes, sir. I want you to join the army. I need federal representation this time. I need to get some bills passed about being petty.
I mean, I'm not a chief petty officer or anything, but you know.
Okay,
no,
so
I mean, in politics it's difficult, right? Because people take cheap shots all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I'm also like, the way I was raised, you're not just going to, talk about me out of turn. And so I have had to come out forcefully about, there's been some things I would have let slide, but sometimes some things have to be addressed. You can be called petty for addressing some things like that. But like, that's, in terms of answering Jamie's question, like I do have like small stuff, like really small stuff that bothers me sometimes.
No, I'm talking about when you're calling someone to see if they're going to support you in your campaign and they hang up. You call them right back, like, no, you didn't just hang up on me.
That's a waste of time. We got to keep it moving. We got if you won't give me the time of day, then you just did me a favor. I can move right along. We got other people to talk to because we got voters we got to bring out. And if you ain't on board, we got to keep going.
Now I received a text message, right, that said that they wanted me to like sign a petition. Right, this is in the midst of the pandemic. So I got the text message, I looked at it, and I typed, yeah, I'll sign a petition. I can't remember exactly what it was. But then they called, and it's like, well, we want to come by, and we want you to sign off on a petition. No, nobody's coming by. So is that petty?
No, I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, not wanting a stranger to come to your house is not petty. That's just safe.
I don't know. Me, myself, I think that I'm willing to, like, sign a petition, but I'm not willing to let you come to my house in the midst of a pandemic or non-pandemic. Nobody comes here.
Interesting. I don't think it has to do. Yeah, you just no one comes to your house. That doesn't do with anything else other than the fact that you're just being petty, point blank. Well, Will, we thank you for your time. We always like to close out our show by giving our guests, we'll say our last words of advice or anything that you want to shout out, or how can people get in contact with you and find you, and all that stuff. So, floor is yours.
So, thank you. So to learn more information, thank you all for having me on. I appreciate it. Like I said, I tell this story because people need to hear it, and I'm authentic about this, wanting to fight for people who struggle. To learn more about my platform, you can go to willforsouthjersey.com. On Facebook, it's Will Cunnigham for New Jersey. On Twitter, it's at Will Cunnigham. Our election's been moved back from June 2nd. It's been pushed back to July 7th. So, we need some people to come out and support someone who knows the struggle. But I also do have a small petty thing I wanted to end on too, because I always forget how much it bothers me until it happens. Every time I ask for dipping sauce at a fast food restaurant, having worked at McDonald's before, like I'm like, all right, if someone always if they ask for it, they always got it. I asked for it once, and I know you're supposed to check your bag before you pull off, but like, for not getting my dipping sauce is really a huge pet peeve. Like, then I gotta eat sauceless nuggets. Like, it's a thing.
So, well, now I need to ask you: when you were an employee, did you get mad when somebody asked you for extra ketchup?
I mean, no, because I understood. I get it.
Maybe acting like it's their personal ketchup and sauce, though. Like, it's not yours. Like, just give me.
No, I mean, if I give you 3 packs and you're asking for 3 more, then like that's a little overkill. But yeah.
Jamie, did you check your bag before you pull out of McDonald's?
I just got the McDonald's today, and I said, can I have extra syrup? And not only did I not get extra syrup, but they didn't put syrup in the bag. And I said it to like every person that I ordered from.
Did you go back and tell them about it?
No, you do not go back and ask for stuff when they mess your order.
They're going to give you some syrup. It's not the kind that's going to be that you're thinking. They're going to give you some other kind of syrup.
Special stuff.
But they messed up. You're supposed to call them out on it.
Yeah, here's what's going to happen. He's going to say, Chris, we need some more syrup. We got somebody who wants extra syrup. That's what's going to happen. One person in the restaurant that has extra syrup is going to be Chris.
That's too funny. Jamie, any last words before we get out of here?
No, just do some research before you vote. If you're old enough to vote, you should vote. It's your right to vote, and make sure you know who you're voting for.
Awesome. Mr. Petty, what you got?
Well, I'll say this. I'm so petty that I'm actually going to endorse Will for no other reason because he knows the struggle of having food stamps. That's the only reason why I'm going to vote for Will, because he knows how it feels to have that white money. Nobody understands the struggle of having
those paper. Those. I mean, they got cards now, but I mean, when I was a kid, there was paper, and yeah, I know that life. So.
Fun. Again, Will, thank you for being on the show. For everyone that's out there listening, now is the time for change. We need strong leadership. If there's anything that you're passionate about, be it education or not, start doing your research and start looking for leaders and putting them in the right place. If not for anything, I personally vote just because people died for me to have the right to vote. So I pay homage to them and doing that. I'm in education because people died for me to have the right to be in education. So I just look for pockets to want to give back in that sense as well. But now is the time for you to think about the change you want to see on the back end of this thing. It's going to be big, especially in the world of education. On the back end of it, there could be a lot of changes, and we need to have the right people in place in order to make the right changes. We can mess around here if we want to, but we need to make sure they have the right people in the right places so that we can get this thing right moving forward in terms of education. So, again, big shout out to Will and anybody else that's out there putting in that work too. Definitely appreciate everyone that's doing that and willing to give back. So, as we say always here, stay tuned and stay empowered.